Okay, so if you spend any time at all looking at real estate investing online, you've definitely heard of it, the BRRRR method. It gets thrown around like it's this secret money glitch for building a massive rental portfolio with almost none of your own cash. But is it really a brilliant wealth building hack, or is it just a super high stakes gamble with a catchy name? Let's break it down and see if the numbers really truly work.
The whole idea of fixing up a property, pulling all your cash back out, and then doing it again, it sounds a little too good to be true, doesn't it? And that's exactly where the big debate gets started among investors.
And this question from an investor on Reddit just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures that skepticism. It feels like you're creating money out of thin air. But as we're about to see, the reality is a whole lot more complicated. So what is this strategy actually supposed to be? All right, let's decode this thing. The whole strategy is really a five-step cycle. And the real power, at least according to its fans, comes from repeating that cycle over and over and over again. So, first things first, BRRRR stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. Pretty simple, right? But here's the thing. Every single one of those steps is absolutely crucial. If just one part of that chain breaks, the entire strategy can just completely fall apart. So here's the game plan in a nutshell. You start by finding a property that needs some love, something undervalued. Then you renovate it, you fix it up. This is what investors call forcing appreciation. Once it looks great, you find some tenants and get that rental income flowing. Then comes the key move. You go to a bank and refinance the property based on its new, much higher value, pulling your initial investment back out. And finally, you take that cash and, yep, you guessed it, you repeat the whole process with the next property. And I really want to emphasize this point. The success of the entire BRRR cycle really hinges on those first two steps, the buy and the rehab. You absolutely have to buy the property cheap enough so that your renovation costs don't just eat up all the potential equity you're trying to build. And here is the ultimate promise of the BRRR method. Those last two steps, refinance and repeat, are what supposedly turn this from a one-off project into a portfolio building machine. By pulling your capital back out, you can, in theory, grow your number of properties way faster than saving up for a new down payment every single time. Okay, so that's the theory, but how does this all shake out financially? For this strategy to work, the math has to be pretty much perfect. So let's actually look at the numbers. But before we go any further, there's one term we absolutely have to understand. It's the after repair value, or ARV. Now, this isn't just what you think the house is worth. This is the official number an appraiser gives the property after you've done all the work. Your entire refinance, the whole shebang, depends on this one number. So you know what? Let's put this whole theory to the test. An investor actually shared a full breakdown of one of their deals, and this is where we get to see if the numbers can actually work in the real world. First up, the all-in cost. How much money did they actually need to make this happen? Well, in this case, they spent a total of $196,000. And that's not just the price of the house. That includes all the renovation costs and the closing fees. That's the capital they had to have ready to go. So after all the dust settled from the rehab, the property got appraised for $280,000. That's a huge dump. By focusing on the right upgrades, kitchens, bathrooms, things that really add value, they basically forced the appreciation up, creating $84,000 in brand new equity. That value increase right there is the engine that makes this whole thing go. And now for the moment of truth, the refinance. The investor goes to a new bank, who looks at the appraisal and agrees, yep, this place is worth $280 grand. Now, lenders will typically give you a loan for about 75% of that new value. So in this case, the investor walks away with a check from the bank for $203,000. So let's look at the final math. They take that $203,000 from the new loan, they use it to pay off their original $196,000 investment, and they actually walk away with $7,000 cash in their pocket. And here's the kicker. Even after the new higher mortgage payment, that's your PITI, your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, the property still makes a little money every month. They got all their investment back, plus a little extra, and now they own a profitable rental property. I mean, that is the BRRR dream right there. Okay, but hold on. If it's really that easy, why isn't everyone doing it and becoming a real estate mogul? Well, that perfect on-paper scenario often crashes head first into the messy, high-stakes reality of the real world. So let's talk about the pitfalls. Yeah, for every promise, there is a pretty serious pitfall. Build wealth with less cash? You still need a ton of capital upfront for the purchase and the rehab. Scale your portfolio quickly? You run a huge risk of over-leveraging yourself with a mountain of debt. And that forced equity from the rehab? That only works if your renovation budget doesn't spiral completely out of control.
And this, right here, is probably the #1 challenge that you hear from experienced investors. Just finding a property that's cheap enough to even try the BRRRR method is incredibly hard these days. You make your money when you buy, and if you overpay even a little bit, the whole strategy is basically dead on arrival.
This is another massive factor right now. The BRRRR strategy really thrived when interest rates were at historic lows. But today, when you go to refinance, your new mortgage payment is going to be based on a much, much higher interest rate. That can completely wipe out your cash flow and sometimes even turn what looked like a profitable rental into a property that loses you money every single month. And finally, let's not forget about the clock. Most lenders have what's called a seasoning period, which means they won't even let you refinance for at least 6 months after you buy. So that big chunk of capital you invested, it's tied up for half a year, completely unavailable for any other deals. It is definitely not the rapid-fire process some people on social media make it out to be. So after weighing the dream scenario against all of these pretty harsh realities, what's the final verdict here? Is this a viable strategy, or is it just way too risky for the average person to try? Maybe the best way to think about this comes from one investor who called it financial engineering. And that's perfect. BRRRR isn't really a real estate strategy about picking a nice house. It's a leverage theory. It's all about skillfully using debt to acquire assets. It's a much more high-level financial play. So let's just quickly summarize the key takeaways. First, this is absolutely not free money. It's borrowed money and it has to be paid back. Second, it's a tool for aggressive growth, not a safe set-it-and-forget-it investment. Third, its success is tied to things you can't control, like interest rates in the housing market. And finally, and maybe most importantly, whether it's right for you really just comes down to your own personal tolerance for taking on risk. In the end, BRRRR can be an incredibly powerful tool in the right hands at the right moment in the market. But it is not a money glitch. It's a strategy for maximizing leverage where the potential rewards are matched only by the very real potential risks. So the question you have to ask yourself isn't just, can I make the numbers work? It's, am I prepared for what happens when they don't? Can you afford to take that risk?